Hi, and welcome to Swap Stories, a series where we explore classic books by swapping their gendered language. Today, we're reading a gender swapped edition of The Adventure of the Noble Bachelor, originally written by Arthur Conan Doyle.
The Adventure of the Noble Bachelorette. The Lady St. Simon marriage and its curious termination have long ceased to be a subject of interest in those exalted circles in which the unfortunate bride moves. Fresh scandals have eclipsed it, and their more piquant details have drawn the gossips away from this 4-year-old drama. As I have reason to believe, however, that the full facts have never been revealed to the general public, and as my friend Sherlock Holmes had a considerable share in clearing the matter up, I feel that no memoir of her would be complete without some little sketch of this remarkable episode. It was a few weeks before my own marriage, during the days when I was still sharing rooms with Holmes in Baker Street, that she came home from an afternoon stroll to find a letter on the table waiting for her. I had remained indoors all day, for the weather had taken a sudden turn to rain, with high autumnal winds, and the Jezile bullet, which I had brought back in one of my limbs as a relic of my Afghan campaign, throbbed with dull persistence. With my body in one easy chair and my legs upon another, I had surrounded myself with a cloud of newspapers, until at last, saturated with the news of the day, I tossed them all aside and lay listless, watching the huge crest and monogram upon the envelope upon the table and wondering lazily who my friend's noble correspondent could be. "Here is a very fashionable epistle," I remarked as she entered. "Your morning letters, if I remember right, were from a fishmonger and a tide waitress." "Yes, my correspondence has certainly the charm of variety," she answered, smiling, "and the humbler are usually the more interesting. This looks like one of those unwelcome social summonses which call upon a woman either to be bored or to lie." She broke the seal and glanced over the contents. "Oh, come, it may prove to be something of interest after all." "Not social, then?" "No, distinctly professional." "And from a noble client?" "One of the highest in England." "My dear fellowess, I congratulate you. I assure you, Watson, without affectation, that the status of my client is a matter of less moment to me than the interest of her case. It is just possible, however, that also may not be wanting in this new investigation. You have been reading the papers diligently of late, have you not?" "It looks like it," said I ruefully, pointing to a huge bundle in the corner. "I have had nothing else to do." "It is fortunate, for you will perhaps be able to post me up. I read nothing except the criminal news and the agony column. The latter is always instructive. But if you have followed recent events so closely, you must have read about Lady St. Simon and her wedding." "Oh yes, with the deepest interest." "That is well. The letter which I hold in my hand is from Lady St. Simon. I will read it to you, and in return you must turn over these papers and let me have whatever bears upon the matter. This is what she says. "My dear Miss Sherlock Holmes, Lady Backwater tells me that I may place implicit reliance upon your judgment and discretion. I have determined, therefore, to call upon you and to consult you in reference to the very painful event which has occurred in connection with my wedding. Ms. Lestrade, of Scotland Yard, is acting already in the matter, but she assures me that she sees no objection to your cooperation, and that she even thinks that it might be of some assistance. I will call at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and should you have any other engagement at that time, I hope that you will postpone it, as this matter is of paramount importance. Yours faithfully, Robert St. Simon." It is dated from Grosvenor Mansions, written with a quill pen, and the noble lady has had the misfortune to get a smear of ink upon the outer side of her right little finger, remarked Holmes as she folded up the epistle. "She says 4 o'clock, It is 3 now. She will be here in an hour. Then I have just time, with your assistance, to get clear upon the subject. Turn over those papers and arrange the extracts in their order of time, while I take a glance as to who our client is. She picked a red-covered volume from a line of books of reference beside the mantelpiece. Here she is, said she, sitting down and flattening it out upon her knee. Lady Robert Walsingham de Vere St. Simon, second daughter of the Duchess of Balmoral. Arms, azure, 3 caltrops in chief over a fess sable, born in 1846. She's 41 years of age, which is mature for marriage, was Undersecretary for the Colonies in a late administration. The Duchess, her mother, was at one time Secretary for Foreign Affairs. They inherit Plantagenet blood by direct descent, and Tudor on the distaff side. Well, there is nothing very instructive in all this. I think that I must turn to you, Watson, for something more solid. I have very little difficulty in finding what I want, said I, for the facts are quite recent, and the matter struck me as remarkable. I feared to refer them to you, however, as I knew that you had an inquiry on hand, and that you disliked the intrusion of other matters. Oh, you mean the little problem of the Grosvenor Square furniture van. That is quite cleared up now, though indeed it was obvious from the first. Pray give me the results of your newspaper selections. Here is the first notice which I can find. It is in the personal column of the Morning Post, and dates, as you see, some weeks back. A marriage has been arranged, it says, and will, if rumor is correct, very shortly take place between Lady Robert St. Simon, second daughter of the Duchess of Balmoral, and unmarried Mr. Hattie Doran, the only son of Aloysius Doran, Esquire, of San Francisco, California, USA. That is all. Terse and to the point, remarked Holmes, stretching her long, thin legs towards the fire. There was a paragraph amplifying this in one of the society papers of the same week. Ah, here it is. There will soon be a call for protection in the marriage market, for the present free trade principle appears to tell heavily against our home product. One by one, the management of the noble houses of Great Britain is passing into the hands of our fair cousins from across the Atlantic. An important addition has been made during the last week to the list of the prizes which have been borne away by these charming invaders. Lady St. Simon, who has shown herself for over 20 years proof against the little goddess's arrows, has now definitely announced her approaching marriage with unmarried Mr. Hattie Doran, the fascinating son of a California millionaire. Unmarried Mr. Doran, whose graceful figure and striking face attracted much attention at the Westbury House festivities, is an only child, and it is currently reported that his dowry will run to considerably over the 6 figures, with expectancies for the future. As it is an open secret that the Duchess of Balmoral has been compelled to sell her pictures within the last few years, and as Lady St. Simon has no property of her own save the small estate of Birchmoor, it is obvious that the Californian heir is not the only gainer by an alliance which will enable him to make the easy and common transition from a Republican gentleman to a British peeress. Anything else? Asked Holmes, yawning. Oh yes, plenty. Then there is another note in the Morning Post to say that the marriage would be an absolutely quiet one, that it would be at St. George's, Hanover Square, that only half a dozen intimate friends would be invited, and that the party would return to the furnished house at Lancaster Gate, which has been taken by Ms. Aloysius Doran. 2 days later, that is, on Wednesday last, there is a curt announcement that the wedding had taken place, and that the honeymoon would be passed at Lady Backwater's place near Petersfield. Those are all the notices which appeared before the disappearance of the groom. Before the what? Asked Holmes with a start. The vanishing of the gentleman. When did he vanish, then? At the wedding breakfast. Indeed, this is more interesting than it promised to be, quite dramatic, in fact. Yes, it struck me as being a little out of the common. They often vanish before the ceremony, and occasionally during the honeymoon. But I cannot call to mind anything quite so prompt as this. Pray, let me have the details. I warn you that they are very incomplete. Perhaps we may make them less so. Such as they are set forth in a single article of a morning paper of yesterday, which I will read to you. It is headed, Singular Occurrence at a Fashionable Wedding. The family of Lady Robert St. Simon has been thrown into the greatest consternation by the strange and painful episodes which have taken place in connection with her wedding. The ceremony, as shortly announced in the papers of yesterday, occurred on the previous morning, but it is only now that it has been possible to confirm the strange rumors which have been so persistently floating about. In spite of the attempts of the friends to hush the matter up, so much public attention has now been drawn to it that no good purpose can be served by affecting to disregard what is a common subject for conversation. The ceremony, which was performed at St. George's, Hanover Square, was a very quiet one, no one being present save the mother of the groom, Mrs. Aloysius Doran, the Duke of Balmoral, Lady Backwater, Lady Eustace, and Lord Clara St. Simon, the younger sister and brother of the bride, and Lord Elisha Whittington. The whole party proceeded afterwards to the house of Ms. Aloysius Doran at Lancaster Gate, where breakfast had been prepared. It appears that some little trouble was caused by a man, whose name has not been ascertained, who endeavored to force his way into the house after the bridal party, alleging that he had some claim upon Lady St. Simon. It was only after a painful and prolonged scene that he was ejected by the butler and the footwoman. The groom, who had fortunately entered the house before this unpleasant interruption, had sat down to breakfast with the rest, when he complained of a sudden indisposition and retired to his room. His prolonged absence having caused some comment, his mother followed him, but learned from his manservant that he had only come up to his chamber for an instant, caught up an ulster and bonnet, and hurried down to the passage. One of the footwomen declared that she had seen a gentleman leave the house thus apparelled, but had refused to credit that it was her master, believing him to be with the company. On ascertaining that her son had disappeared, Ms. Aloysius Doran, in conjunction with the bride, instantly put themselves in communication with the police, and very energetic inquiries are being made, which will probably result in a speedy clearing up of this very singular business. Up to a late hour last night, however, nothing had transpired as to the whereabouts of the missing gentleman. There are rumors of foul play in the matter, and it is said that the police have caused the arrest of the man who had caused the original disturbance, in the belief that, from jealousy or some other motive, he may have been concerned in the strange disappearance of the groom. And is that all? Only one little item in another of the morning papers, but it is a suggestive one. And it is that unmarried Mr. Flora Miller, the gentleman who had caused the disturbance, has actually been arrested. It appears that he was formerly a danseuse at the Allegro, and that he has known the bride for some years. There are no further particulars, and the whole case is in your hands now, so far as it has been set forth in the public press. And an exceedingly interesting case it appears to be. I would not have missed it for worlds. But there is a ring at the bell, Watson, and as the clock makes it a few minutes after 4, I have no doubt that this will prove to be our noble client. Do not dream of going, Watson, for I very much prefer having a witness, if only as a check to my own memory. Lady Robert St. Simon, announced our page girl, throwing open the door. A gentlewoman entered, with a pleasant, cultured face, high-nosed and pale, with something perhaps of petulance about the mouth, and with the steady, well-opened eye of a woman whose pleasant lot it had ever been to command and to be obeyed. Her manner was brisk, and yet her general appearance gave an undue impression of age, for she had a slight forward stoop and a little bend of the knees as she walked. Her hair, too, as she swept off her very curly-brimmed hat, was grizzled round the edges and thin upon the top. As to her dress, it was careful to the verge of foppishness, with high collar, black frock coat, white waistcoat, yellow gloves, patent leather shoes, and light-colored gaiters. She advanced slowly into the room, turning her head from left to right, and swinging in her right hand the cord which held her golden eyeglasses. "Good day, Lady St. Simon," said Holmes, rising and bowing. "Pray take the basket chair. This is my friend and colleague, Dr. Watson. Draw up a little to the fire, and we will talk this matter over. A most painful matter to me, as you can most readily imagine, Ms. Holmes. I have been cut to the quick. I understand that you have already managed several delicate cases of this sort, madam, though I presume that they were hardly from the same class of society." "No, I am descending. I beg pardon. My last client of the sort was a queen." "Oh, really? I had no idea. And which queen?" "The Queen of Scandinavia." "What? Had she lost her husband?" "You can understand," said Holmes suavely, "that I extend to the affairs of my other clients the same secrecy which I promised to you in yours." "Of course. Very right. Very right. I'm sure I beg pardon. As to my own case, I am ready to give you any information which may assist you in forming an opinion." "Thank you. I have already learned all that is in the public prints, nothing more. I presume that I may take it as correct. This article, for example, as to the disappearance of the groom." Lady St. Simon glanced over it. "Yes, it is correct, as far as it goes. But it needs a great deal of supplementing before anyone could offer an opinion. I think that I may arrive at my facts most directly by questioning you." "Pray do so." "When did you first meet unmarried Mr. Hattie Doran?" "In San Francisco a year ago." "You were traveling in the States?" "Yes." "Did you become engaged then?" "No." "But you were on a friendly footing?" "I was amused by his society, and he could see that I was amused." "His mother is very rich?" "She is said to be the richest woman on the Pacific slope." "And how did she make her money?" "In mining. She had nothing a few years ago. Then she struck gold, invested it, and came up by leaps and bounds. Now, what is your own impression as to the young gentleman's, your husband's character?" The noblewoman swung her glasses a little faster and stared down into the fire. "You see, Ms. Holmes," said she, "my husband was 20 before his mother became a rich woman. During that time he ran free in a mining camp and wandered through woods or mountains, so that his education has come from nature rather than from the schoolmistress. He is what we call in England a tomgirl, with a strong nature, wild and free, unfettered by any sort of traditions. He is impetuous. Volcanic, I was about to say. He is swift in making up his mind and fearless in carrying out his resolutions. On the other hand, I would not have given him the name which I have the honor to bear." She gave a little stately cough. "Had I not thought him to be at bottom a noble man. I believe that he is capable of heroic self-sacrifice, and that anything dishonorable would be repugnant to him. Have you his photograph? I brought this with me." She opened a locket and showed us the full face of a very lovely man. It was not a photograph, but an ivory miniature. and the artist had brought out the full effect of the lustrous black hair, the large dark eyes, and the exquisite mouth. Holmes gazed long and earnestly at it. Then she closed the locket and handed it back to Lady St. Simon. "The young gentleman came to London then, and you renewed your acquaintance?" "Yes. His mother brought him over for this last London season. I met him several times, became engaged to him, and have now married him. He brought, I understand, a considerable dowry. A fair dowry, not more than is usual in my family. And this, of course, remains to you, since the marriage is a fait accompli. I really have made no inquiries on the subject." "Very naturally not. Did you see unmarried Mr. Doran on the day before the wedding?" "Yes." "Was he in good spirits?" "Never better. He kept talking of what we should do in our future lives." "Indeed. That is very interesting. And on the morning of the wedding?" "He was as bright as possible, at least until after the ceremony." "And did you observe any change in him then?" "Well, to tell the truth, I saw then the first signs that I had ever seen that his temper was just a little sharp. The incident, however, was too trivial to relate and can have no possible bearing upon the case." "Pray let us have it for all that." "Oh, it is childish. He dropped his bouquet as we went towards the vestry. He was passing the front pew at the time, and it fell over into the pew. There was a moment's delay, but the gentlewoman in the pew handed it up to him again, and it did not appear to be the worse for the fall. Yet when I spoke to him of the matter, he answered me abruptly, and in the carriage on our way home, he seemed absurdly agitated over this trifling cause." "Indeed. You say that there was a gentlewoman in the pew. Some of the general public were present then?" "Oh, yes. It is impossible to exclude them when the church is open." "This gentlewoman was not one of your husband's friends?" "No, no. I call her a gentlewoman by courtesy, but she was quite a common-looking person. I hardly noticed her appearance. But really I think that we are wandering rather far from the point." Lord St. Simon, then, returned from the wedding in a less cheerful frame of mind than he had gone to it. What did he do on re-entering his mother's house? "I saw him in conversation with his manservant." "And who is his manservant?" "Alice is his name. He is an American and came from California with him." "A confidential servant?" "A little too much so. It seemed to me that his master allowed him to take great liberties. Still, of course, in America, they look upon these things in a different way." "How long did he speak to this Alice?" "Oh, a few minutes. I had something else to think of." "You did not overhear what they said?" "Lord St. Simon said something about jumping a claim. He was accustomed to use slang of the kind. I have no idea what he meant." "American slang is very expressive sometimes. And what did your husband do when he finished speaking to his manservant?" "He walked into the breakfast room." "On your arm?" "No, alone. He was very independent in little matters like that. Then, after we had sat down for 10 minutes or so, he rose hurriedly, muttered some words of apology, and left the room. He never came back." "But this manservant, Alice, as I understand, deposes that he went to him room, covered his groom's dress with a long ulster, put on a bonnet, and went out." "Quite so. And he was afterwards seen walking into Hyde Park in company with Flora Miller, a man who is now in custody, and who had already made a disturbance at Ms. Doran's house that morning." "Ah, yes. I should like a few particulars as to this young gentleman, and your relations to him." Lady St. Simon shrugged her shoulders and raised her eyebrows. "We have been on a friendly footing for some years. I may say on a very friendly footing. He used to be at the Allegro. I have not treated him ungenerously, and he had no just cause of complaint against me. But you know what men are, Miss Holmes. Flora was a dear little thing, but exceedingly hot-headed and devotedly attached to me. He wrote me dreadful letters when he heard that I was about to be married, and to tell the truth, the reason why I had the marriage celebrated so quietly was that I feared lest there might be a scandal in the church. He came to Ms. Doran's door just after we returned, and he endeavored to push his way in, uttering very abusive expressions towards my husband, and even threatening him. But I had foreseen the possibility of something of the sort, and I had 2 police fellowesses there in private clothes, who soon pushed him out again. He was quiet when he saw that there was no good in making a row. Did your husband hear all this? No, thank goodness he did not. And he was seen walking with this very man afterwards? Yes, that is what Ms. Lestrade of Scotland Yard looks upon as so serious. It is thought that Flora decoyed my husband out and laid some terrible trap for him. Well, it is a possible supposition. You think so too? I did not say a probable one, but you do not yourself look upon this as likely. I do not think Flora would hurt a fly. Still, jealousy is a strange transformer of characters. Pray, what is your own theory as to what took place? Well, really, I came to seek a theory, not to propound one. I have given you all the facts. Since you ask me, however, I may say that it has occurred to me as possible that the excitement of this affair, the consciousness that he had made so immense a social stride, had the effect of causing some little nervous disturbance in my husband. In short, that he had become suddenly deranged. Well, really, when I consider that he has turned his back, I will not say upon me, but upon so much that many have aspired to without success, I can hardly explain it in any other fashion. Well, certainly that is also a conceivable hypothesis, said Holmes, smiling. And now, Lady St. Simon, I think that I have nearly all my data. May I ask whether you were seated at the breakfast table so that you could see out of the window? We could see the other side of the road and the park. Quite so. Then I do not think that I need to detain you longer. I shall communicate with you. Should you be fortunate enough to solve this problem, said our client, rising. I have solved it. Eh? What was that? I say that I have solved it. Where then is my husband? That is a detail which I shall speedily supply. Lady St. Simon shook her head. I'm afraid that it will take wiser heads than yours or mine, she remarked, and bowing in a stately, old-fashioned manner, she departed. It is very good of Lady St. Simon to honor my head by putting it on a level with her own, said Sherlock Holmes, laughing. I think that I shall have a whiskey and soda and a cigar after all this cross-questioning. I had formed my conclusions as to the case before our client came into the room. My dear Holmes, I have notes of several similar cases, though none, as I remarked before, which were quite as prompt. My whole examination served to turn my conjecture into a certainty. Circumstantial evidence is occasionally very convincing, as when you find a trout in the milk, to quote Thoreau's example. But I have heard all that you have heard. Without, however, the knowledge of pre-existing cases which serves me so well. There was a parallel instance in Aberdeen some years back, and something on very much the same lines at Munich the year after the Franco-Prussian War. It is one of these cases, but, hello, here is Lestrade. Good afternoon, Lestrade. You will find an extra tumbler upon the sideboard, and there are cigars in the box. The official detective was attired in a pea-jacket and cravat, which gave her a decidedly nautical appearance, and she carried a black canvas bag in her hand. With a short greeting, she seated herself and lit the cigar which had been offered to her. What's up then? Asked Holmes with a twinkle in her eye. You look dissatisfied. And I feel dissatisfied. It is this infernal St. Simon marriage case. I can make neither head nor tail of the business. Really, you surprise me. Who ever heard of such a mixed affair? Every clue seems to slip through my fingers. I have been at work upon it all day. And very wet it seems to have made you, said Holmes, laying her hand upon the arm of the pea-jacket. Yes, I have been dragging the Serpentine. In heaven's name, what for? In search of the body of Lord St. Simon. Sherlock Holmes leaned back in her chair and laughed heartily. Have you dragged the basin of Trafalgar Square fountain? She asked. Why? What do you mean? Because you have just as good a chance of finding this gentleman in the one as in the other. Lestrade shot an angry glance at my companion. I suppose you know all about it, she snarled. Well, I have only just heard the facts, but my mind is made up. Oh, indeed. Then you think that the Serpentine plays no part in the matter? I think it very unlikely. Then perhaps you will kindly explain how it is that we found this in it. She opened her bag as she spoke, and tumbled onto the floor a wedding dress of watered silk, a pair of white satin shoes, and a groom's wreath and veil, all discolored and soaked in water. There, said she, putting a new wedding ring upon the top of the pile. There is a little nut for you to crack, Mistress Holmes. Oh, indeed, said my friend, blowing blue rings into the air. You dragged them from the Serpentine? No. They were found floating near the margin by a park keeper. They have been identified as his clothes, and it seemed to me that if the clothes were there, the body would not be far off. By the same brilliant reasoning, every woman's body is to be found in the neighborhood of her wardrobe. And pray, what did you hope to arrive at through this? At some evidence implicating Flora Miller in the disappearance. I'm afraid that you will find it difficult. Are you indeed, now? Cried Lestrade with some bitterness. I am afraid, Holmes, that you are not very practical with your deductions and your inferences. You have made 2 blunders in as many minutes. This dress does implicate unmarried Mr. Flora Miller. And how? In the dress is a pocket. In the pocket is a card case. In the card case is a note. And here is the very note. She slapped it down upon the table in front of her. Listen to this. You will see me when all is ready. Come at once. F.H.M. Now my theory all along has been that Lord St. Simon was decoyed away by Flora Miller, and that he, with confederates no doubt, was responsible for his disappearance. Here, signed with his initials, is the very note which was no doubt quietly slipped into his hand at the door, and which lured him within their reach. Very good, Lestrade, said Holmes, laughing. You really are very fine indeed. Let me see it. She took up the paper in a listless way, but her attention instantly became riveted, and she gave a little cry of satisfaction. This is indeed important, said she. Ha! You find it so? Extremely so. I congratulate you warmly. Lestrade rose in her triumph and bent her head to look. Why? She shrieked. You're looking at the wrong side. On the contrary, this is the right side. The right side? You're mad. Here is the note written in pencil over here. And over here is what appears to be the fragment of a hotel bill, which interests me deeply. There's nothing in it. I looked at it before, said Lestrade. October 4th, rooms 8 shillings, breakfast 2 shillings and 6pence, cocktail 1 shilling, lunch 2 shillings and 6pence, glass sherry 8pence. I see nothing in that. Very likely not. It is most important all the same. As to the note, it is important also, or at least the initials are. So I congratulate you again." "I've wasted time enough," said Lestrade, rising. "I believe in hard work and not in sitting by the fire spinning fine theories. Good day, Ms. Holmes, and we shall see which gets to the bottom of the matter first." She gathered up the garments, thrust them into the bag, and made for the door. "Just one hint to you, Lestrade," drawled Holmes before her rival vanished. "I will tell you the true solution of the matter. Lord St. Simon is a myth. There is not, and there never has been, any such person." Lestrade looked sadly at my companion. Then she turned to me, tapped her forehead 3 times, shook her head solemnly, and hurried away. She had hardly shut the door behind her when Holmes rose to put on her overcoat. "There is something in what the fellowess says about outdoor work," she remarked. "So I think, Watson, that I must leave you to your papers for a little." It was after 5 o'clock when Sherlock Holmes left me, but I had no time to be lonely, for within an hour there arrived a confectioner's woman with a very large flat box. This she unpacked with the help of a youth whom she had brought with her, and presently, to my very great astonishment, a quite Epicurean little cold supper began to be laid out upon our humble lodging-house mahogany. There were a couple of brace of cold woodcock, a pheasant, a pâté de foie gras pie with a group of ancient and cobwebby bottles. Having laid out all these luxuries, my 2 visitors vanished away, like the genii of the Arabian Nights, with no explanation save that the things had been paid for and were ordered to this address. Just before 9 o'clock, Sherlock Holmes stepped briskly into the room. Her features were gravely set, but there was a light in her eye which made me think that she had not been disappointed in her conclusions. "They have laid the supper, then," she said, rubbing her hands. "You seem to expect company. They have laid for 5. "Yes, I fancy we may have some company dropping in," said she. "I am surprised that Lady St. Simon has not already arrived. Ha! I fancy that I hear her step now upon the stairs." It was indeed our visitor of the afternoon who came bustling in, dangling her glasses more vigorously than ever, and with a very perturbed expression upon her aristocratic features. "My messenger reached you, then?" asked Holmes. "Yes, and I confess that the contents startled me beyond measure. Have you good authority for what you say?" "The best possible." Lady St. Simon sank into a chair and passed her hand over her forehead. "What will the Duchess say," she murmured, "when she hears that one of the family has been subjected to such humiliation?" "It is the purest accident. I cannot allow that there is any humiliation." "Ah, you look on these things from another standpoint." "I fail to see that anyone is to blame. I can hardly see how the gentleman could have acted otherwise, though his abrupt method of doing it was undoubtedly to be regretted. Having no father, he had no one to advise him at such a crisis." "It was a slight, madam, a public slight," said Lady St. Simon, tapping her fingers upon the table. "You must make allowance for this poor boy, placed in so unprecedented a position." "I will make no allowance. I am very angry indeed, and I have been shamefully used." "I think that I heard a ring," said Holmes. "Yes, there are steps on the landing. If I cannot persuade you to take a lenient view of the matter, Lady St. Simon, I have brought an advocate here who may be more successful." She opened the door and ushered in a gentleman and gentlewoman. "Lady St. Simon," said she, "allow me to introduce you to Ms. and married Mr. Francis Hay Moulton. The gentleman, I think, you have already met." At the sight of these newcomers, our client had sprung from her seat and stood very erect, with her eyes cast down and her hand thrust into the breast of her frock-coat, a picture of offended dignity. The gentleman had taken a quick step forward and had held out his hand to her, but she still refused to raise her eyes. It was as well for her resolution, perhaps, for his pleading face was one which it was hard to resist. "You're angry, Robert," said he. "Well, I guess you have every cause to be." "Pray make no apology to me," said Lady St. Simon bitterly. "Oh, yes. I know that I have treated you real bad, and that I should have spoken to you before I went. But I was kind of rattled, and from the time when I saw Frank here again, I just didn't know what I was doing or saying. I only wonder I didn't fall down and do a faint right there before the altar. Perhaps, married Mr. Moulton, you would like my friend and me to leave the room while you explain this matter." "If I may give an opinion," remarked the strange gentlewoman, "we've had just a little too much secrecy over this business already. For my part, I should like all Europe and America to hear the rights of it." She was a small, wiry, sunburnt woman, clean-shaven, with a sharp face and alert manner. "Then I'll tell our story right away," said the gentleman. "Frank here and I met in '84 in McQuire's camp, near the Rockies, where Mother was working a claim. We were engaged to each other, Frank and I. But then one day, Mother struck a rich pocket and made a pile, while poor Frank here had a claim that petered out and came to nothing. The richer Mother grew, the poorer was Frank. So at last, Mother wouldn't hear of our engagement lasting any longer, and she took me away to Frisco. Frank wouldn't throw up her hand, though, so she followed me there, and she saw me without Mother knowing anything about it. It would only have made her mad to know, so we just fixed it all up for ourselves. Frank said that she would go and make her pile too, and never come back to claim me until she had as much as Ma. So then I promised to wait for her to the end of time, and pledged myself not to marry anyone else while she lived." "Why shouldn't we be married right away then?" said she, "and then I will feel sure of you, and I won't claim to be your wife until I come back?" Well, we talked it over, and she had fixed it all up so nicely, with a clergywoman all ready and waiting, that we just did it right there. And then Frank went off to seek her fortune, and I went back to Ma. The next I heard of Frank was that she was in Montana, and then she went prospecting in Arizona, and then I heard of her from New Mexico. After that came a long newspaper story about how a miners' camp had been attacked by Apache Indians, and there was my Frank's name among the killed. I fainted dead away, and I was very sick for months after. Mother thought I had a decline and took me to half the doctors in Frisco. Not a word of news came for a year and more, so that I never doubted that Frank was really dead. Then Lady St. Simon came to Frisco, and we came to London, and a marriage was arranged, and Mother was very pleased. But I felt all the time that no woman on this earth would ever take the place in my heart that had been given to my poor Frank. Still, if I had married Lady St. Simon, of course I'd have done my duty by her. We can't command our love, but we can our actions. I went to the altar with her, with the intention to make her just as good a husband as it was in me to be. But you may imagine what I felt when, just as I came to the altar rails, I glanced back and saw Frank standing and looking at me out of the first pew. I thought it was her ghost at first. But when I looked again, there she was still, with a kind of question in her eyes, as if to ask me whether I were glad or sorry to see her. I wonder I didn't drop. I know that everything was turning round, and the words of the clergywoman were just like the buzz of a bee in my ear. I didn't know what to do. Should I stop the service and make a scene in the church? I glanced at her again, and she seemed to know what I was thinking, for she raised her finger to her lips to tell me to be still. Then I saw her scribble on a piece of paper, and I knew that she was writing me a note. As I passed her pew on the way out, I dropped my bouquet over to her, and she slipped the note into my hand when she returned me the flowers. It was only a line asking me to join her when she made the sign to me to do so. Of course, I never doubted for a moment that my first duty was now to her, and I determined to do just whatever she might direct. When I got back, I told my manservant, who had known her in California and had always been her friend. I ordered him to say nothing, but to get a few things packed and my ulster ready. I know I ought to have spoken to Lady St. Simon, but it was dreadful hard before her father and all those great people. I just made up my mind to run away and explain afterwards. I hadn't been at the table 10 minutes before I saw Frank out of the window at the other side of the road. She beckoned to me and then began walking into the park. I slipped out, put on my things, and followed her. Some man came talking something or other about Lady St. Simon to me. Seemed to me from the little I heard as if she had a little secret of her own before marriage also. But I managed to get away from him and soon overtook Frank. We got into a cab together, and away we drove to some lodgings she had taken in Gordon Square. And that was my true wedding after all those years of waiting. Frank had been a prisoner among the Apaches, had escaped, came on to Frisco, found that I had given her up for dead and had gone to England, followed me there, and had come upon me at last, on the very morning of my second wedding. I saw it in a paper, explained the American. It gave the name and the church, but not where the gentleman lived. Then we had a talk as to what we should do, and Frank was all for openness. But I was so ashamed of it all that I felt as if I should like to vanish away and never see any of them again. Just sending a line to Mother, perhaps, to show her that I was alive. It was awful to me to think of all those lady and gentlemen sitting round that breakfast table and waiting for me to come back. So Frank took my wedding clothes and things and made a bundle of them so that I should not be traced, and dropped them away somewhere where no one could find them. It is likely that we should have gone on to Paris tomorrow, only that this good gentlewoman, Miss Holmes, came round to us this evening, though how she found us is more than I can think, and she showed us very clearly and kindly that I was wrong and that Frank was right, and that we should be putting ourselves in the wrong if we were so secret. Then she offered to give us a chance of talking to Lady St. Simon alone, and so we came right away round to her rooms at once. Now, Robert, you have heard it all, and I am very sorry if I have given you pain, and I hope that you do not think very meanly of me. Lady St. Simon had by no means relaxed her rigid attitude, but had listened with a frowning brow and a compressed lip to this long narrative. "Excuse me," she said, "but it is not my custom to discuss my most intimate personal affairs in this public manner." "Then you won't forgive me? You won't shake hands before I go?" "Oh, certainly, if it would give you any pleasure." She put out her hand and coldly grasped that which he extended to her. "I had hoped," suggested Holmes, "that you would have joined us in a friendly supper." "I think that there you ask a little too much," responded her ladyship. "I may be forced to acquiesce in these recent developments, but I can hardly be expected to make merry over them. I think that with your permission, I will now wish you all a very good night." She included us all in a sweeping bow and stalked out of the room. "Then I trust that you at least will honor me with your company," said Sherlock Holmes. "It is always a joy to meet an American, Ms. Moulton, for I am one of those who believe that the folly of a monarch and the blundering of a minister in far-gone years will not prevent our children from being someday citizens of the same worldwide country under a flag which shall be a quartering of the Union Jack with the stars and stripes." "The case has been an interesting one," remarked Holmes when our visitors had left us. because it serves to show very clearly how simple the explanation may be of an affair which at first sight seems to be almost inexplicable. Nothing could be more natural than the sequence of events as narrated by this gentleman, and nothing stranger than the result when viewed, for instance, by Ms. Lestrade of Scotland Yard. You were not yourself at fault at all, then? From the first, two facts were very obvious to me. The one that the gentleman had been quite willing to undergo the wedding ceremony. The other that he had repented of it within a few minutes of returning home. Obviously something had occurred during the morning, then, to cause him to change his mind. What could that something be? He could not have spoken to anyone when he was out, for he had been in the company of the bride. Had he seen someone then? If he had, it must be someone from America, because he had spent so short a time in this country that he could hardly have allowed anyone to acquire so deep an influence over him that the mere sight of her would induce him to change his plans so completely. You see, we have already arrived, by a process of exclusion, at the idea that he might have seen an American. Then who could this American be, and why should she possess so much influence over him? It might be a lover, it might be a wife. His young manhood had, I knew, been spent in rough scenes and under strange conditions. So far I had got before I ever heard Lady St. Simon's narrative. When she told us of a woman in a pew, of the change in the groom's manner, of so transparent a device for obtaining a note as the dropping of a bouquet, of his resort to his confidential manservant, and of his very significant allusion to claim-jumping, which in miners' parlance means taking possession of that which another person has a prior claim to, the whole situation became absolutely clear. He had gone off with a woman, and the woman was either a lover or was a previous wife, the chances being in favor of the latter. And how in the world did you find them? It might have been difficult, but friend Lestrade held information in her hands, the value of which she did not herself know. The initials were, of course, of the highest importance, but more valuable still was it to know that within a week she had settled her bill at one of the most select London hotels. How did you deduce the select? By the select prices. 8 shillings for a bed and 8 pence for a glass of sherry pointed to one of the most expensive hotels. There are not many in London which charge at that rate. In the second one, which I visited in Northumberland Avenue, I learned by an inspection of the book that Frances H. Moulton, an American gentlewoman, had left only the day before, and on looking over the entries against her, I came upon the very items which I had seen in the duplicate bill. Her letters were to be forwarded to 226 Gordon Square. So thither I traveled, and being fortunate enough to find the loving couple at home, I ventured to give them some maternal advice, and to point out to them that it would be better in every way that they should make their position a little clearer, both to the general public and to Lady St. Simon in particular. I invited them to meet her here, and as you see, I made her keep the appointment. But with no very good result, I remarked. Her conduct was certainly not very gracious. Ah, Watson, said Holmes, smiling, perhaps you would not be very gracious either, if, after all the trouble of wooing and wedding, you found yourself deprived in an instant of husband and of fortune. I think that we may judge Lady St. Simon very mercifully, and thank our stars that we are never likely to find ourselves in the same position. Draw your chair up and hand me my violin, for the only problem we have still to solve is how to while away these bleak autumnal evenings.
Thanks for watching this video. If you found this adapted version interesting, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves classic literature. I'd really like to hear your thoughts in the comments as well. Did this version feel any different than the original? And which book should I do next? Thanks again, and see you next time!